Okay, we're talking about correlation coefficient. I wanted to talk you through this with a couple of common examples. First common example we have the number of rotten hot dogs at your party as compared to the number of people disgusted by you. And I wanted to look at this particular scatter plot. If you look at all these little dots, actually when I got this little scatter plot with the dots, it didn't have this line drawn on there. I drew that on myself just to make this point. It seems like if I were to take it dot for dot, you could analyze this and make a really predictable outcome in the future. Because we'd say, well, if you bring exactly one rotten hot dog to your party, then you find the dot that goes with one. It's got like 2 people that are disgusted by you as a person. Or if you have like 5 rotten hot dogs at your party, then there's like 8 people disgusted. More importantly, though, you can see how these kind of go along in a pretty straight line trend, and they're not like all up and down all over the place. And so it would be pretty easy to predict. There's no dot around here for the 10 value, but you'd be like, well, this is such a straight line trend, I could easily predict what would happen in the future if I were to have 10 rotten hot dogs at the next party. It would be somewhere close to around 14 people. Bam. About 14 people that would be disgusted by me at that point, because that seems to be where the line is pointing. By the time we get to 10, it's 14. And you'd be pretty confident that it would be somewhere around there because there's not a lot of fluctuation. There's not dots like all over, these outliers and stuff flying all over the place. They're pretty much all in a straight line. This is what a strong positive correlation is about, and that's where our correlation coefficient comes in. We're going to say if you have a very straight line looking thing that's really predictable for future events, that is it's such a strong correlation that you know exactly what's going on, a very strong relationship, well defined between the two. We define this correlation coefficient to be what we call, well, I would say by motivation you just call it strong once again, but mathematically speaking, it would be a number that's close to the whole number 1, because we always explain these things in terms of ratios. And so we'd have something like close to the number 1 would be like 0.95 or 0.98 or something like that. This is very close to the number 1. And how that's calculated is it's like pretty sophisticated statistic stuff that you could certainly get into if you wanted to, but most people don't want to. And then looking at this other example, we have grip strength as compared to arm strength, like hand strength versus arm strength. And you can see that over here, when there's very little grip strength, there is very little arm strength involved with different people. But by the time you get people that have a lot of grip strength, they also have a lot of arm strength, typically. But there's so much variation inside here, it's not real easy to make the straight line thing happen, like if we were to try and make a line of best fit, you just kind of be like, there's ways to mathematically define this, but this is, it's kind of pretty good guesswork. But no matter what best fit line you choose, these dots are not a straight line. And so you're like, well, I can kind of tell what the relationship is, in that, like, if I kind of have people with more grip strength, they're kind of going to have more arm strength, but there's no definite prediction going to go on. And so we would say a correlation like this, where it's just all bizarrely all over the place, but there's kind of a trend, as a weak positive correlation. And we would define that, or we would say if we ran our stats on it, the correlation coefficient would be closer. It would be farther away from the number 1. It would be maybe something more like 0.3 or something like that. Because every correlation coefficient is, if you ever watch other boring videos on correlation coefficient, people always say it's somewhere between 0 and 1. It's this little ratio thing. It's always a fraction deal, and we put it as a decimal form. And so this one would be like 0.3 or 0.32 or something like that, just because it's a very weak correlation coefficient. And that's about all you need to know about it at this point. It is a number, it's a ratio that we use to tell how strong a relationship there is between two things, or how predictable one variable is going to be based on the other. This one, it's very easy to predict where exactly your next dot is going to go, because it's going to keep going on that line. This one, I've got this line that sort of works, but if I say I got somebody that's got 200 pounds of grip strength, then I don't know what their arm strength's going to be. It could be down here like 110, or it could be way up, I don't know, somewhere. It could be anywhere, because of the way all this other stuff is going. That's how the cookie bounces.